Silas Cade held the letter over the campfire. His hand didn't shake from age or cold. It shook from memory. The ink had faded to ghost gray, but he still knew every word she'd written 10 years ago. Come back to me. He never did. Told himself he was too old, too broke, too mean for a woman like her. He dropped the letter into the flames and watched the smoke curl up into the Wyoming sky. That was Tuesday. By Thursday, she was bleeding on his porch, carrying a secret that would blow his whole world apart. If you love stories about second chances and love that refuses to die, hit that subscribe button and stay with me till the very end. And drop your city in the comments. I want to see just how far this story travels. The rifle went off before Silas meant it to. The elk dropped clean, one shot through the neck at 200 yards. Silas lowered the Winchester and stood there on the ridge, watching the animal kick twice and go still. He didn't feel pride. He didn't feel much of anything anymore. Killing was just work. Eating was just habit. Breathing was just something his body did without asking permission. He whistled. Grit came limping up the trail, one-eyed, gray-muzzled, half-wolf, and all stubborn. The dog sniffed the air and looked up at Silas with his good eye. "Yeah," Silas muttered. "I know. Let's get it done before the flies." He was 54 years old, 6'2", still broad across the chest, still strong enough to haul a bull elk down a mountain on a travois he'd built himself. But his right knee hadn't bent right since Palo Duro Canyon in '74, and his left shoulder popped every time he swung an axe. The scar on his jaw, a Comanche knife 8 years ago, pulled tight when he chewed. His hands were maps of old damage, and his back told him every morning that it was considering retirement. He dressed the elk where it fell, worked fast, quiet. Grit sat watch. It was July. The Bighorn Mountains were green and wild, and the heat down in the valleys would kill a man who wasn't careful. Up here, at 8,000 feet, the air stayed cool enough to breathe, and the nights could still frost. That's why Silas lived up here. That, and the fact that nobody else wanted to. He'd been on this mountain 10 years. 10 years since he rode out of Copper Creek with nothing but a saddle, a rifle, and the taste of a woman still on his lips. 10 years of silence. He liked silence. Silence didn't lie. By the time he got the meat back to the cabin and hung it in the smokehouse, the sun was dropping behind the peaks. He washed his hands in the creek, and Grit drank beside him. Silas looked at his reflection in the water. Gray in the beard, lines around the eyes. The kind of face that made children cross the street. "Getting old, boy," he said to the dog. Grit sneezed. "Yeah, you too." He was sitting on the porch, cleaning the Winchester, when Grit's head snapped up. The dog's one eye locked on the tree line below the cabin. A growl started low in his chest. "Easy," Silas said. He set the rifle across his knees. "Probably a cat." But Grit stood up, hackles raised. Not a cat growl. A people growl. Silas cocked the Winchester and stepped to the edge of the porch. The light was going fast, the shadows stretching long and purple through the pines. He scanned the trail, the only trail that came up to his ridge. Nothing. Then movement. Slow. Stumbling. A figure broke through the tree line, weaving like a drunk. It was small, too small for a man. It staggered 3 more steps, then dropped face first in the dirt, 30 yards from the porch. Silas didn't move. He kept the rifle up. People didn't come up this mountain. People knew better. "Hey," he called out. "You're on private land. State your business or crawl back where you came from." No answer. The figure didn't move. Grit whined. He looked up at Silas, then back at the body in the dirt. "Don't start," Silas growled. The dog whined again. Silas cursed. He walked down the steps, rifle aimed, and crossed the yard. The light was bad now, the sky bruised with sunset. He could see it was a woman, dress torn at the hem, boots caked with red dust, hair falling loose over her face. She was lying on her side, one arm stretched out like she'd been reaching for the cabin when her legs quit. He knelt down, rolled her over with one hand, keeping the rifle in the other. Her face was sunburned raw. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her eyes were closed, lashes dark against skin that was too pale under the burn. She was breathing, shallow, fast, heat-sick, dehydrated. She'd been walking in the sun too long. Silas brushed the hair off her face. His hand stopped. His heart stopped. He knew this face. 10 years older, 10 years harder, 10 years carved by something meaner than weather. But he knew her. He'd kissed these cheekbones. He'd held this jaw in his palm. He'd left this woman standing in a doorway in Copper Creek while he rode away like the coward he was. "Ilara," he said. The name came out like it had been waiting in his throat for a decade, just sitting there, gathering dust. She didn't open her eyes, but her cracked lips moved. "Silas." It wasn't a word. It was a prayer. "You damn fool, woman," Silas whispered. He scooped her up. She weighed nothing, or maybe he was too angry to notice, and carried her to the cabin. Grit ran ahead, barking. He laid her on the bed, his bed, the only bed. He grabbed the canteen off the table, tilted her head up, and let water trickle between her lips. She coughed, swallowed, coughed again. "Slow," Silas said. "Slow, or you'll cramp." Her eyes opened. They were brown with gold in them, amber, like whiskey held up to firelight. Those eyes had wrecked him once. They were doing it again. "I found you," Ilara whispered. "You found a way to get yourself killed," Silas snapped. He pulled his hand back and stood up. The cabin suddenly felt too small. 2 people in it made it feel like a coffin. "How'd you get up here? There ain't a stage that runs within 20 miles. "Walked." "From where?" "The river crossing. Horse went lame at the ford. I turned her loose and walked." "That's 15 miles, Ilara, in July. No water, no shade past the canyon." "I know how far it is." "You could have died." "I know that too." Silas stared at her. She stared back. Neither of them blinked. "Why?" he asked. "Give me more water and I'll tell you." He handed her the canteen. She drank, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and sat up slowly. The color was already coming back. She was tougher than she looked. She'd always been tougher than she looked. "Where's your husband?" Silas asked. He said it flat, like the word meant nothing. "Virgil know you're up here?" The silence that followed lasted 3 heartbeats. Silas counted them. "Virgil's dead," Ilara said. Silas felt something move in his chest. He couldn't name it. Didn't want to. "When?" 5 days ago." "How?" Ilara's eyes dropped to her hands. She turned them over, palms up, like she was reading her own fortune. "There was a gun. There was a fight. The gun went off." Silas sat down in the chair across from the bed. He set the rifle across his knees. "You shoot him?" "He was going to kill my boy." "Your boy?" "My son, Jesse. He's 9. "A son." She had a son. Silas felt the walls of the cabin close in another inch. Where's the boy now? Safe. Widow Hawkins in Copper Creek. I hid him before I left. Silas rubbed his face with both hands. His palms scraped against the beard. Ilara, you can't be here. If Virgil's dead, and you're the one who— I didn't murder him, Silas. Her voice cracked for the first time. Not from weakness, from anger. I defended my child. Virgil came home stinking drunk, raging about a poker debt. He grabbed Jesse by the hair. My boy is 9 years old, Silas. 9 years old, and his father grabbed him by the hair and swung a belt at his face. Silas's hands tightened on the rifle stock. I stepped in. Virgil threw me into the wall. I got up. He threw me again. I got up again. She touched her ribs, wincing. Third time, he pulled the revolver from the drawer. Said he'd teach us both a lesson we wouldn't forget. And I fought him for it. The gun went off. He fell. Ilara looked straight at Silas. No tears, no trembling. Just the cold, hard stare of a woman who had lived through something worse than shooting. He fell, and he didn't get up. Silas set the rifle against the wall. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Self-defense. Any judge would see that. Any judge who isn't his brother. The air in the cabin changed. Silas felt it the way he felt a storm coming. A pressure drop. A tightening. Wade, Silas said. U.S. Marshal Wade Dunn, Ilara confirmed. Virgil's big brother. The man who owns every badge, every deed, and every soul in Copper Creek. I know who he is. Then you know he won't wait for a trial. He won't ask questions. He told me to my face, Silas. 3 hours after Virgil died, Wade stood in my kitchen, looked me in the eye, and said— her voice dropped to a whisper. I'm going to hang you in the town square, and then I'm going to put that boy in the ground, next to his daddy. Silas didn't move, but something behind his eyes shifted. Something old and dangerous and patient. He means it, Ilara said. He wants the Dunn land. All of it. Virgil's share passes to Jesse, and Wade would burn down the whole territory before he lets a child stand between him and that deed. So you ran. I ran to the only person in this world I trust. You trust me? Silas laughed. A single, harsh bark. You shouldn't. I left you, Ilara. I left you 10 years ago without looking back. Without looking back? Ilara swung her legs off the bed and stood up. She swayed, caught herself on the bedpost, and walked toward him. She stopped close enough that he could smell dust and sweat and something underneath, something like sage and wild roses. You think I don't know about the letters? Silas went still. Mrs. Hawkins told me. You wrote to her every winter, asked about the store, asked about the town, asked about me. Ilara's voice softened. You asked if I was happy, Silas, every single year. That doesn't mean you never married. You never left this mountain. You live up here like a ghost because you can't stand to be in the same territory as me and not— Stop! Why? Because it's true? Silas stood up. He towered over her, 6'2" of scar tissue and regret. Look at me, Ilara. Look at this. He held up his hands. Broken knuckles, missing the tip of his left ring finger. Calluses thick as leather. I'm 54 years old. I live alone because I ain't fit for people. I got a bum knee, a shoulder that won't rotate past here, he demonstrated, wincing. And I haven't had a conversation longer than 3 sentences in 6 months. I don't care. I'm too old for this, whatever this is. I'm too old for playing husband, too old for playing hero, and I am sure as hell too old for a war with the United States Marshal. Are you finished? I'm just getting started. You need to go to Fort Laramie. Find an honest lawman. File a proper claim of self-defense. I'll give you a horse and supplies. You can be there in... I'm not going to Fort Laramie, Silas. Ilara, I'm not going anywhere. She stepped closer. So close he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, the tiny scar above her eyebrow that hadn't been there 10 years ago. The way her jaw was set like a woman who had made her last decision, and nothing on earth was going to unmake it. I waited for you, she said. I waited 10 years. I married a man I didn't love to save my father, and I paid for that mistake every single day, with blood and bruises and silence. And every night, Silas, every night when Virgil was done with his fists and his whiskey and his cruelty, I lay in the dark, and I thought about the man on the mountain, the man who carved me a wooden songbird, the man who looked at me like I was the only thing worth seeing. That man's dead, Ilara. No, he isn't. He's standing right in front of me, trying to push me away because he's scared. I ain't scared of nothing. You're scared of me. You're scared of what you feel. You've been scared of it for 10 years, and you ran up this mountain to hide from it. Silas turned away. He walked to the window and gripped the sill. The wood groaned under his hands. Outside, the last light was dying. Grit was lying on the porch, nose between his paws. You don't know what I feel, Silas said quietly. Then tell me. Silence. Tell me, Silas. More silence. Tell me you don't love me, and I'll walk back down that mountain tonight. I'll walk to Fort Laramie, I'll file my claim, and you'll never see me again. But you look me in the eye and say it. Silas turned around. She was standing in the middle of his cabin, dusty, sunburned, half dead from the walk, ribs probably cracked. And she was staring at him like she could wait another 10 years if she had to. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That's what I thought, Ilara said softly. The silence between them stretched like a wire pulled tight. Then Silas exhaled, a sound like something heavy falling. He'll come for you, Silas said. Wade. He'll track you here. I know. He won't come alone. He'll bring guns. I know. This ain't a story, Ilara. Men will die. Men already died. My husband died. My dignity died. 10 years of my life died in that house. She reached out and took his hand, the scarred, broken, rough hand of a man who had built his whole life around not being touched. I didn't come here for shelter, Silas. I came here because you're the only man alive who ever made me feel like I was worth fighting for. Silas looked down at her hand in his, small, strong, warm. And there's something else, Ilara said. Her voice changed, dropped lower, tighter, like she was holding a door shut against a storm. What? Jesse, my boy. What about him? He's 9, Silas. Silas frowned. You said. He's 9, not 7, 9. She squeezed his hand. Count backward. Silas stared at her. The math hit him like a mule kick, sudden, brutal, and total. 9 years. He left Copper Creek 10 years ago. The night before he rode out. The night in the hayloft when she'd cried and he'd held her and they'd made promises neither of them kept. No, Silas whispered. He has your eyes, Silas. Gray, like granite. He doesn't cry when he's hurt. He carves wood with a pocket knife. He waits by the window when the storms come, watching the mountains. Silas dropped her hand. He stepped back. His knee hit the chair and he sat down hard. Not because he chose to, but because his legs stopped working. Virgil knew, Elara said, tears finally breaking through. He knew Jesse wasn't his. That's why he hated him. That's why he beat him. Because every time he looked at that boy, he saw you. Silas pressed his fists against his eyes. His chest was heaving. 54 years old, and he'd never once cried on this mountain. Not when the grizzly tore his face. Not when the fever nearly killed him the winter of '79. Not once. But a sound came out of him now that he didn't recognize. Low. Broken. The sound of a wall coming down that had taken 10 years to build. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was wrecked. How? You were gone. No address. No word. Just gone. I would have come back. Would you? He looked up at her. I would have burned down the whole territory to come back. Then come back now. Elara knelt in front of him. She took his face in her hands, his scarred, weathered, old man's face, and she held it like it was the most precious thing she'd ever touched. Come back to me now, Silas. Come back to your son. Outside, the last light died. The mountain went dark. And somewhere below, on the trails that led to Copper Creek, a man with a silver star in his chest was already riding. Silas reached up. He covered her hands with his. He held them against his jaw, feeling the warmth, feeling the realness of it. I ain't too old, he said, his voice raw and rough and absolutely certain. And I ain't running, not this time. He stood up, walked to the wall, took down the gun belt, heavy leather, brass cartridges, the Colt Peacemaker he'd carried since the wars. He buckled it around his waist. If Wade Dunn wants my son, Silas said, he's going to have to come through me. Grit stood up on the porch and howled. Long, high, wild. The sound echoed off the mountains and rolled down into the valley like a warning. The mountain man was done hiding. Elara didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed with a canteen in her hands, watching Silas move through the cabin like a man winding a clock for war. He checked every weapon. He counted ammunition. He tested the bolt on the front door, the latch on the back, the hinges on the shutters. He did it all without speaking, and she let him, because she knew that silence was how Silas Cade processed the kind of news that breaks a man's brain in half. It was Grit who broke the quiet. The dog padded over to Elara and laid his head on her knee. She stroked his ear, the one he still had, and the dog closed his good eye. He doesn't do that, Silas said from across the room. He was loading cartridges into a belt, pressing each one in with his thumb. Do what? Go to strangers. Took him 2 years before he'd let me touch him. Maybe he knows I'm not a stranger. Silas didn't answer that. He hung the cartridge belt on a peg and turned around. Tell me about Wade. Everything. How many men, what guns, how he thinks. Elara let out a slow breath. Wade keeps 4 deputies, full-time. They're not lawmen, Silas. They're ranch hands and drifters he pinned a star on. Cleet Morrison, he's the worst. Killed a miner in Casper 2 years back, and Wade made it disappear. Then there's Billy Pruitt, young, mean, does whatever Cleet says. The other 2 rotate, whoever owes Wade a favor that week. Guns? Wade carries a Schofield, never seen him without it. Cleet has a repeating rifle, a Henry, I think. The others carry whatever they can steal. And Wade himself, how does he fight? He doesn't, not if he can help it. Wade's not like Virgil. Virgil was a drunk with fists. Wade is a planner. He sends men ahead. He watches from a distance. He lets other people bleed. Smart. Dangerous. Same thing. Silas pulled a chair to the table and sat down across from her. The lamp between them threw shadows that made his scar look deeper, his eyes darker. How long before he figures out where you went? He already knows. I wasn't quiet about leaving. Half the town saw me ride north. Then why ain't he here already? Because Wade doesn't rush. He'll gather his men. He'll make a plan. He'll file paperwork first. A warrant, something official. Wade always makes it look legal. That's his gift. How long? Alara calculated. I left 5 days ago. Took me 3 to reach the river crossing, 2 more to get up here. Wade would have started a day behind me, but he's got horses, and he knows the shortcuts. So he could be at the base of this mountain by morning. Yes. Silas leaned back. The chair creaked. Then we don't have time for sleep, and we don't have time for feelings. I need to know everything about the land between here and Copper Creek. Every trail, every water crossing, every choke point. I know the land, Silas. I grew up on it. Good. Then you know the canyon below Miller's Pass. The narrow one? Where the creek runs through? That's the one. If Wade's coming with horses, that's the only route wide enough to ride 4 abreast. Everywhere else, they'd have to go single file. You want to meet them there? I want to make sure they never get past there. Ilara studied his face. You've thought about this before. Someone coming up this mountain. I've thought about it every day for 10 years. I just never thought the reason would be you. Something passed between them. Quick, electric, gone. Silas stood up and walked to the door. He opened it and stood on the porch, looking down into the darkness. Grit followed him out and sat at his feet. Alara came to the doorway. Silas. What? You haven't asked me about him. About Jesse. Silas's back was rigid. She could see the muscles in his shoulders bunch under his shirt. I know he's 9. I know he's mine. I know he carves wood. What else do I need? You need to know that he's afraid of loud voices. That he sleeps with a knife under his pillow because he learned that no one was going to protect him. That he asked me once why his pa hated him so much, and I didn't have an answer that wouldn't destroy him. Silas gripped the porch railing. The wood groaned. You need to know that he drew a picture once. A man on a mountain with a dog. He'd never seen you, Silas. He drew you from my stories. He pinned it above his bed, and Virgil tore it down and burned it, and Jesse didn't cry. He just drew another one and hid it under the floorboards. Stop! You need to hear this. I said stop! Silas's voice broke on the word. Not loud. Quiet. The kind of quiet that sounds like something tearing. He turned around. His eyes were wet. Silas Cade, who hadn't cried in 10 years, had tears running into his beard, and he didn't wipe them away. He let them fall. I left, he said. I left, and my boy grew up getting beat by a man who wasn't his father. That's on me, Alara. Every bruise, every scar, every night he slept with a knife. That's my weight to carry. It's not. Don't you dare tell me it's not my fault. I chose to leave. I chose my pride over you. I told myself I was being noble, riding off so you could have a better life. But I was just scared. Scared I'd fail you. Scared you'd wake up one morning and see me for what I am. A broken-down scout with blood on his hands and nothing in his pockets. And what are you now? Now? Silas wiped his face with his sleeve. Now I'm a father, and that changes everything. He walked back inside. He opened the trunk at the foot of the bed. the one he never opened, and pulled out a wooden box. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a carved songbird. Small, delicate. The wood was dark with age, polished smooth from years of handling. "You kept it," Ilara breathed. "I made it for you, 17 years ago. Day before you turned 16. He held it out to her. I was going to give it to you and tell you how I felt. Instead, I put it in a box and carried it up a mountain." Ilara took the bird. She held it against her chest. "You are the most stubborn, foolish, impossible man I have ever known." "Yes, ma'am." "And I love you. I've loved you since I was 15 years old, standing behind my father's counter, watching you buy salt and trying not to stare. You were staring. You were staring back." For the first time in 10 years, Silas Cade smiled. Not a big smile, not a happy one. It was the kind of smile a man wears when he realizes he's been carrying a stone in his chest and someone just pulled it out. And the hole it left hurts worse than the stone did. But at least now there's room for something else. "All right," he said. "Here's what we're going to do." He pulled a piece of charcoal from the stove and flattened a piece of hide on the table. He drew fast. The mountain, the trails, the canyon, the creek. His hands knew this land the way his lungs knew air. "Wade will come up the south trail. It's the widest, the easiest for horses. He'll send a scout ahead, probably Cleet. Cleet's a tracker. He'll read our sign and report back. So we don't leave sign. We leave exactly the sign I want him to read." Silas tapped the map. "Here, Miller's Canyon. The walls are 60 feet high and the floor is 20 feet wide. Perfect for an ambush." "You're going to ambush a U.S. Marshal." "I'm going to stop a murderer who's wearing a badge. There's a difference." "The law won't see it that way." "The law ain't coming up this mountain, Ilara. Wade made sure of that. He is the law out here. The nearest honest authority is Fort Laramie, and that's 6 days' ride. By the time anyone official gets involved, we'll either be free or we'll be dead." Ilara sat down. She put her hands flat on the table and looked at the crude map. "What do you need me to do?" "Can you still ride?" "I rode 15 miles with cracked ribs 3 days ago. I can ride." "Can you still shoot?" "I put a bullet in Virgil Dunn at 4 feet. I reckon I can manage." Silas looked at her. Really looked. The sunburn was fading. The color in her cheeks made her eyes brighter, fiercer. She wasn't the 18-year-old girl he'd left behind. She was something harder, something forged. "You ain't the same girl, are you?" he said. "No, she died a long time ago, but what grew in her place is stronger." "I see that." "Good. Then stop trying to protect me and start planning with me." Silas nodded. He turned back to the map. "At first light, we ride down to the canyon. I've got traps stored in the old mine shaft at the south entrance. Bear traps, wire, blasting powder. We set the canyon up like a killing floor. When Wade rides in, he rides into hell." "And if he doesn't take the south trail?" "Then we've got a problem. But Wade's vain. He'll come the easy way because he thinks he's chasing a woman and a girl, not a..." "Not a what?" "Not us." They worked through the night. Silas packed saddlebags, ammunition, jerky, a medical kit he'd stitched together from an old army field bag. Ilara cleaned the peacemaker he gave her, handling it with a familiarity that made Silas's stomach tighten. No woman should have to learn a gun the way she'd learned it. Not for sport, not for hunting, but for the night her husband came home too drunk and too angry. "Ilara." "The night I left. The night in the hayloft." He paused, the words stacking up in his throat like logs in a jam. "Did you know? When I rode out the next morning, did you know you were..." No, not then. I knew 3 weeks later. By then you were gone, and Virgil had already come calling with flowers and promises and my father's medical bills. You married him because of me. I married him because I had no choice. Don't you dare make that your guilt too, Silas Cade. You're carrying enough. I should've, would've, could've. Those words are poison, Silas. They'll kill you slower than any bullet. She set down the gun and looked at him. We're here now. That's what matters. Jesse is alive. I'm alive. You're alive. And tomorrow, we fight for the right to stay that way. Silas swallowed hard. What does he look like? Up close, not just, what does he look like when he laughs? Ilara's face changed, softened. He doesn't laugh much. Virgil beat that out of him early. But when he does, Silas, when he does, his whole face opens up. His eyes crinkle just like yours, and he tips his head back just like you do. And for a second, just a second, he looks like nothing bad has ever happened to him. Silas turned away. He busied himself with the saddlebag. His hands were shaking, and he didn't want her to see. He's going to know you, Ilara said. He already does, in a way. I told him stories about a man who lived on a mountain with a one-eyed dog, a man who could track a deer through a rainstorm, a man who carved birds out of wood. You told him about me. Every night. It was the only bedtime story that made him feel safe. Silas buckled the saddlebag shut. He stood with his back to her for a long moment. Then he said, in a voice so low she almost missed it, I'm going to get him back, Ilara. I'm going to bring him home. And then I'm going to spend whatever years I got left making up for the ones I wasted. That's all I ever wanted to hear. Dawn came fast. The sky turned pink, then gold, then blazing white. Silas led 2 horses out of the lean-to, a buckskin gelding he called Dust, and a paint mare he'd traded for last spring. He saddled them both, checked the cinches twice, and loaded the saddlebags. Ilara came out dressed in a pair of Silas's old trousers, belted tight, and one of his shirts with the sleeves rolled up. She'd tied her hair back with a strip of rawhide. The peacemaker hung on her hip. Silas stopped and stared. What? She said. Nothing. Nothing. Mount up. They rode down the mountain single file, Silas leading on Dust, Ilara behind on the mare. Grit trotted alongside, his nose working the ground. The morning was quiet. Too quiet. No birds singing. No wind. Just the creak of leather and the soft thud of hooves on packed earth. 2 miles down, Silas pulled up sharp. He raised his fist. Ilara stopped behind him. What is it? Silas pointed at the trail ahead. Fresh horse droppings, still steaming in the morning air. That's not a wild horse, Silas said quietly. That's a shod horse. Someone came through here in the last hour. Scout? Has to be. Cleet, probably. Riding ahead to find the trail. Ilara's hand went to the peacemaker. How far ahead? Silas dismounted and knelt by the tracks. He read them the way a preacher reads scripture, with certainty and dread. 1/2 mile, moving slow. He's reading our trail from yesterday. Your trail, coming up. He'll follow it straight to the cabin. And find it empty. That'll spook him. He'll ride back to Wade and report. Silas stood up. We've got maybe 3 hours before they regroup and come in force. Is that enough time? It'll have to be. They pushed the horses hard down the switchback trail, dropping into the canyon from the north end. The walls rose up on either side, red rock streaked with white, the creek running shallow and clear down the center. Silas led them to the old mine shaft, a dark hole in the canyon wall, half hidden by deadfall. Inside, he found what he'd stashed over the years. Bear traps, rusted but functional. A spool of wire. 4 sticks of blasting powder wrapped in waxed paper. And a box of percussion caps. "Help me carry these," Silas said. They worked fast. Silas buried 2 bear traps in the soft sand where the canyon narrowed to 15 feet. Any horse coming through would step right on them. He strung wire across the trail at knee height, anchored to iron stakes driven into the rock. He placed the blasting powder in a crack in the canyon wall, 20 feet up, packed it with loose rock, and ran a fuse down to ground level. "When they come through," Silas explained, kneeling by the fuse, "the traps take the lead horses. The wire catches the ones behind. And this," he gestured to the packed charge above, "brings half the wall down on whatever's left. And us? We'll be up there." He pointed to a ledge on the opposite wall, 30 feet up, flat, wide enough for 2, with good cover. "We shoot down. They can't shoot up. Not easily. Not with rock falling on their heads." Ilara looked up at the ledge. "I can make that climb. With cracked ribs? I climbed 15 miles of mountain trail with cracked ribs. I can climb 30 feet of rock." Silas almost smiled. Almost. "There's one more thing." "What?" "If this goes wrong, if they get through, if I go down, you don't stay. You ride north. There's a ranch on the Yellowstone, run by a man named Harlan McGraw. We served together in the wars. You tell him Silas Cade sent you. He'll protect you and the boy." "Silas, promise me." "I'm not promising to leave you. You're not promising to leave me. You're promising to save our son. There's a difference." The word hit them both. Our son. It hung in the canyon air, echoing off the walls. Silas had said it without thinking, and now it was real in a way it hadn't been before. Not her son. Not his son. Theirs. Ilara took his hand. "I promise, but you better not make me keep it." "I'll do my best." "Do better than your best, Silas Cade. Your boy needs a father, a real one, not a ghost on a mountain." Silas squeezed her hand. Then he let go and picked up the rifle. "Get to the ledge. Take the canteen and the extra ammunition. When you hear the first trap spring, you light the fuse. I left you 18 inches. That's about 45 seconds before it blows. You light it, get flat, cover your ears." "Where will you be?" "Down here." "Down here? In the canyon? Where the rock is going to fall?" "I'll be behind the bend, out of the blast zone. I need to be on the ground to finish whoever comes through." "That's insane." "That's the plan. It's a terrible plan. It's the only plan. Now climb." Ilara held his eyes for a long moment. Then she turned, grabbed the rock face, and started climbing. Silas watched her go. Hand over hand, boots finding holds, ribs surely screaming. And she didn't stop, didn't slow, didn't look down. When she reached the ledge, she turned and looked at him. From up there, with the morning sun behind her and the red rock framing her face, she looked like something out of a painting he'd never deserved to own. "Silas," she called down. "What?" "When this is over, you're going to meet your son, and you're going to tell him you love him, and you're going to mean it." "I already mean it." "Then survive." Silas checked the Winchester. Full magazine. He checked the Colt on his hip. 6 rounds. He checked the knife on his belt. Sharp enough to split a hair. Then he walked to the bend in the canyon, pressed his back against the rock, and waited. Grit sat beside him, one ear up, one eye watching the south entrance. The dog's nose twitched, his body tensed. "Yeah," Silas whispered. I hear them too. The sound of hooves on stone, distant, growing, the jingle of tack, the murmur of men's voices carrying through the canyon like water through a pipe. Silas closed his eyes. He thought about a boy he'd never met who drew pictures of a man on a mountain. He thought about a wooden songbird that had waited 17 years to be given. He thought about a woman who had walked through hell to find him. He opened his eyes. He cocked the rifle. They were coming. The first horse came around the bend at a walk. Silas could hear the rider breathing, heavy, nervous. Not Wade. Wade wouldn't ride point. This was a scout, testing the water. Silas pressed his back against the rock and held still. Grit was flat on his belly, silent, trained by years of hunting to disappear. The horse stepped forward. Another step. Another. The bear trap fired with a sound like God slamming a door. Metal on bone. The horse screamed, a terrible, human sound, and went down hard on its front knees. The rider flew over the animal's neck and hit the canyon floor face first. Silas didn't move. Not yet. Behind the fallen horse, chaos erupted. Shouts, horses rearing. A second horse hit the wire at knee height and stumbled sideways into the canyon wall, pinning its rider's leg against the rock. The man screamed. "Ambush!" someone shouted. "Pull back! Pull back!" But they couldn't pull back. The canyon was too narrow. The horses behind were pushing forward into the horses ahead, and the fallen animals were blocking the retreat. Silas counted to 3. Then he stepped around the bend, raised the Winchester, and fired. The first shot took the pinned rider in the shoulder. He went limp. The second shot punched through a saddlebag on the lead horse, missing the man behind it by inches. Silas worked the lever and fired again, deliberately hitting rock, sending shrapnel spraying. He wasn't trying to kill them all. He was trying to make them bunch up. They bunched. "Now, Alara!" Silas roared. 30 feet above, Alara struck the match. Her hands were steady. She touched the flame to the fuse. It caught, hissing, spitting sparks, racing up the canyon wall toward the packed charge. She got flat, covered her ears. The explosion split the world open. The canyon wall cracked like an eggshell, and 1,000 pounds of rock and dust came down on the trail. Horses screamed. Men screamed. The ground shook so hard, Silas lost his footing and went down on one knee. Dust billowed through the canyon like fog. Silas couldn't see 10 feet. He pulled his bandana over his nose and moved forward, Winchester up, stepping over rubble. The first body he found was the scout, Billy Pruitt, young and mean, just like Alara had described. He was alive, groaning, his leg twisted at an angle that meant he wasn't walking anywhere. Silas kicked the pistol out of his reach and kept moving. The second man was buried under rock from the waist down, dead. Silas didn't know him. Hired gun. Didn't matter now. That was 2 down. The pinned rider with a shoulder wound made 3. That left 2. Cleet Morrison and Wade Dunn. The dust was settling. Silas moved forward, ears ringing from the blast. A horse stumbled past him, wild-eyed, saddle hanging loose. He let it go. "Cade!" Wade's voice. Somewhere ahead, past the rockfall. Clear, controlled, not panicking. That was bad. A panicking man makes mistakes. A calm man makes plans. "That was dramatic, Cade. I'll give you that." Wade's voice echoed off the canyon walls. Silas couldn't pinpoint the direction. "Blasting powder, really? You blow up a United States Marshal, and they'll hang you from here to Washington." Silas didn't answer. He kept moving, crouched low, rifle sweeping left and right. "I know you can hear me, old man. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to hand over Alara Dunn. She's going to stand trial for the murder of my brother. And you're going to go back to your mountain and pretend none of this ever happened." Silas pressed against the canyon wall and edged forward. The rockfall had created a barrier across half the canyon floor, a jagged pile of boulders and dust. On the other side, he could hear horses stamping, at least two. "Alternatively," Wade continued, and now his voice had that smooth, reasonable tone that made Silas's skin crawl, "I kill you both, take the boy, and tell the territory you attacked a lawman. Either way, I win. It's just a question of how much paperwork I want to do." "You talk too much, Wade," Silas called out. He moved immediately after speaking. 3 steps left, behind a boulder. A rifle shot cracked the air and hit the spot where he'd been standing. Cleet, shooting from elevation. The bastard had climbed the wall on the far side. Silas looked up at Alara's ledge. She was pressed flat, invisible from below. Good. But Cleet was on the opposite wall, which meant he might be able to see her from his angle. "Alara!" Silas shouted. "Roll left! Shoot her on the east wall!" A rifle shot hit the ledge. Rock chips exploded inches from where Alara's head had been. She rolled hard, pressing into a shallow groove in the stone. "I see her!" Pleat's voice, high and excited. "I got her pinned, Marshal." "Put one in her and we go home," Wade called back, casual as ordering a drink. Silas's blood went cold. He spun, searching the east wall. There, 40 feet up, wedged behind a rock outcrop. Cleet Morrison, rifle barrel glinting. He was sighting on Alara's ledge. Silas raised the Winchester. The angle was bad, shooting almost straight up, sun in his eyes, dust still floating. He had maybe 2 seconds before Cleet pulled the trigger. He fired. The shot hit rock a foot below Cleet's position. Close, but close doesn't count. Cleet flinched, pulled back, then leaned out again, aiming at Alara. Silas worked the lever. Empty. The magazine was dry. "No," Silas breathed. He dropped the Winchester and drew the Colt. A handgun at 40 feet, shooting upward against a man with a rifle behind cover. Cleet fired. The bullet hit the ledge again, and this time, Silas heard Alara cry out. Something inside Silas Cade caught fire. Not rage. Rage is hot and blind. This was cold. This was the thing that had kept him alive through the Comanche Wars, through the winters, through the bears and the bullets and the loneliness. This was survival turned inside out. This was a man who had just found everything worth living for and was watching it get shot at. He aimed the Colt, took a breath, let half of it out, squeezed. The Colt bucked. The shot echoed. Cleet Morrison jerked backward, the rifle spinning out of his hands. He grabbed at the rock, missed, and fell. 40 feet. He hit the canyon floor with a sound that Silas would hear in his sleep for years. "Alara!" Silas shouted. "You hit!" A pause. Too long. Way too long. "I'm here." Her voice was tight, strained. "Rock chips cut my arm. I'm bleeding, but I'm okay." "Can you move?" "I can move." "Then get down, now. Use the backside of the ledge." Silas spun back toward the rockfall. Wade was still out there. Wade and at least one horse. And Wade had just watched his entire plan collapse in about 90 seconds. A desperate Wade was more dangerous than a confident one. Silas moved through the rockfall, climbing over boulders, the Colt in his right hand, his left hand grabbing rock for balance. His knee was screaming. His shoulder was grinding. Every joint he'd abused for 54 years was sending him a very clear message. And the message was, Stop. He didn't stop. He cleared the rockfall and came out on the other side. 2 horses stood riderless, reins tangled in scrub brush, saddlebags open. A repeating rifle lay in the dirt. Cleats Henry dropped when the man climbed. No Wade. Silas crouched. He scanned the canyon ahead. Nothing. Just the creek running clear and the walls rising high. "Wade," Silas called. "It's over. Your men are done. Ride out and I let you go." Silence. "I ain't interested in killing a lawman, Wade, even a crooked one. Ride out. Go back to Copper Creek. File your papers. Do whatever you need to do. But she's not yours to take." More silence. Then, a sound behind him. The click of a hammer being cocked. Very close. "You always were sentimental, Cade." Silas froze. Wade was behind him. The man had circled back through the rockfall while Silas was climbing over it. Smart. Patient. Exactly like Alara had said. "Drop the pistol," Wade said. Silas dropped the Colt. It hit the sand with a soft thud. "Turn around. Slow." Silas turned. Wade Dunn stood 10 feet away. His hat was gone. His duster was torn and covered in dust. But the Schofield in his hand was rock steady, and the silver star on his chest still caught the light. Up close, Wade didn't look like a villain. He looked like a banker. Clean-shaven, square jaw, hair combed back, even after an explosion. He had the kind of face that juries trusted, and women admired, and men obeyed. That was the danger of Wade Dunn. He looked like the law, even when he was breaking it. "You blew up 3 of my deputies," Wade said. "They were trespassing." "On a mountain? There's no deed to that mountain, Cade. No claim. You're a squatter. And you're a murderer wearing a badge." Wade's eye twitched, just barely. "Virgil was my brother. Virgil was a woman-beater who went after a 9-year-old boy with a belt." "Your brother got what was coming, Wade. And somewhere in that pressed shirt and polished star, you know it. What I know is that Alara Dunn killed a Dunn, and Dunns don't die without payment. This is about the land. This is about family. Horse shit. This is about the deed to Virgil's ranch. Jesse inherits. You can't touch it while the boy's alive. So you plan to kill the mother, take the boy, and make the whole problem disappear. That ain't law, Wade. That's just greed in a costume." Wade's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about my family. I know your brother beat his wife for 10 years. I know you knew and did nothing. I know you stood in her kitchen 3 hours after Virgil died and threatened to kill a child. Your brother's child, Wade. His son. That boy is not Virgil's son." The words landed like a slap. Silas held perfectly still. "You think I'm stupid, Cade?" Wade took a step closer. The Schofield didn't waver. "Virgil told me. Years ago. The boy doesn't look like a Dunn. Doesn't act like a Dunn. Virgil suspected from the start. And when the boy's eyes came in gray instead of brown, he knew." "So you've known?" "I've known that my brother's wife made a bastard with a mountain drifter and passed it off as legitimate. I've known that the Dunn name, my father's name, has been hanging on a lie for 9 years. That boy is innocent. That boy is a fraud, and the woman who made him is a killer, and the man who sired him is standing in front of me with no gun and no friends and no future." Wade raised the Schofield to Silas's chest. "Any last words?" "Just one question. Make it quick. If you knew the boy wasn't Virgil's, why do you want the land so bad? Jesse's got no legal claim if he's not blood." Wade's expression flickered. Something crossed his face. Not doubt, but calculation. Because nobody else knows, Cade. The town thinks Jesse is Virgil's heir. If that boy lives, he inherits. If he inherits, I spend the next 10 years fighting lawyers. But if the boy and his mother tragically die while resisting arrest, well, then the land passes to the next Dunn in line. You. Me. It was always going to be me. You'd kill a child for dirt. I'd kill a bastard to protect a legacy. There's a difference. Silas looked into Wade's eyes. They were calm, clear. The eyes of a man who had already done the math and was satisfied with the arithmetic. Silas had known evil in his life. The random, senseless kind that shows up on a battlefield or in a bar fight. But this was different. This was organized. This was a man who could murder a 9-year-old boy and file the paperwork before supper. Well, Silas said quietly, I reckon there's only one thing left to do. Die? Stall. Wade frowned. What? The rock hit Wade in the back of the head. Not a big rock, about the size of a fist, thrown from 30 feet up with the accuracy of a woman who had spent 10 years learning to survive by any means necessary. Wade stumbled forward. The Schofield went off. The bullet tore past Silas's ear so close he felt the heat. And Wade dropped to one knee, clutching the back of his skull. Silas moved. He didn't go for the gun on the ground. He went for Wade. 54 years old, bad knee, bad shoulder, bleeding from cuts he couldn't count, and he crossed 10 feet of canyon floor like a man half his age. He hit Wade low, driving his shoulder into the marshal's ribs. They went down together, crashing into the sand. The Schofield flew from Wade's hand and skittered across the rock. Wade was younger by 6 years, stronger, faster. He got a forearm across Silas's throat and pushed. Silas gagged, his vision sparking. "Stupid old man," Wade grunted, bearing down. Silas couldn't breathe. He clawed at Wade's arm, but the man had leverage and weight. The edges of Silas's vision went dark. He thought about Jesse, the boy he'd never met, the boy who drew pictures of a man on a mountain. Silas stopped clawing. He reached down to his belt. His fingers found the handle of the hunting knife. He pulled it free. Wade saw it too late. He tried to roll, but Silas drove the blade into the meat of Wade's forearm. Not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to make the man scream and let go. Silas sucked in air, rolled sideways, got to his knees. Wade was up too, clutching his bleeding arm, his face twisted with pain and fury. He lunged for the Schofield on the ground. Silas threw the knife. It wasn't a clean throw. It tumbled end over end and hit Wade in the thigh, handle first. Didn't cut, but it tripped him. Wade went down hard, his fingers inches from the gun. A boot came down on the Schofield. Ilara's boot. She stood over Wade Dunn, with blood running down her left arm, dust in her hair, and the peacemaker aimed at the center of his face. "Don't," she said. Wade looked up at her. Blood from his scalp wound was running into his eyes. His arm was bleeding. His dignity was somewhere in the dust behind him. But his voice was steady. "You won't shoot me, Ilara. You don't have it in you." "I shot your brother." "My brother was a drunk who couldn't fight back. I'm a United States Marshal. You shoot me and you'll hang. Both of you. And the boy goes to a territorial orphanage where they'll work him until his bones break." "Shut up," Silas growled, getting to his feet. "You know I'm right, Cade. Kill me and you're outlaws. Every lawman in Wyoming territory comes for you. Every bounty hunter. You'll run for the rest of your short, miserable lives, and that boy will never know a single day of peace." Silas looked at Ilara. She looked at him. The peacemaker was steady in her hands, but he could see the doubt in her eyes. Not about pulling the trigger, about what came after. "He's right," Alara whispered. "I know." "So what do we do?" Silas picked up the Schofield from under Alara's boot. He checked the cylinder. 2 rounds left. He looked down at Wade. "Get up," Silas said. Wade stood slowly, favoring his cut arm. "Smart decision." "Shut your mouth. I ain't done." Silas grabbed Wade by the collar and shoved him against the canyon wall. He pressed the Schofield under Wade's chin. "Here's what's going to happen, Marshall. You're going to ride back to Copper Creek. You're going to tell everyone that you found Alara Dunn and determined that Virgil's death was self-defense. You're going to sign the papers. And you're going to leave her and the boy alone for the rest of your natural life." Wade laughed. "And why would I do that?" "Because of what I know." Silas leaned in close enough that Wade could smell the gunpowder on his skin. "You just told me your whole plan, Wade. Out loud. In a canyon." Wade's smile faltered. "You told me you knew the boy wasn't Virgil's. You told me you planned to kill a woman and a child to steal land. You told me, and her." Silas jerked his head toward Alara. "That's 2 witnesses. And I've got a friend at Fort Laramie who served under General Crook. Colonel James Whitfield. You know that name?" Wade's face went white. "I see you do. Whitfield's been looking for a reason to clean up the marshals in Wyoming Territory. Corruption, land fraud, abuse of power. I write him a letter, Wade. 1 letter. And your star, your land, your name, all of it goes into a hole so deep you'll never climb out." "You're bluffing." "Try me." The 2 men stared at each other. The canyon was quiet. The creek trickled. Somewhere above, a hawk circled. "You ride out," Silas said. "You fix this. You make it right. And in return, I don't write that letter. You keep your badge. You keep your pride. And you keep your life." He pressed the Schofield harder under Wade's chin. "But if you ever come near Alara or my son again, I won't write a letter. I'll come find you myself. And I won't bring a badge or a warrant or a jury. I'll bring a shovel." Wade's eyes were wild, calculating, racing through options and finding none that ended well. "Your deputies are either dead or broken," Silas continued. "The ones who survive will talk. If you go back and spin a story about self-defense, they'll back you. Because the alternative is admitting they rode with a corrupt marshal on a personal killing mission. Everyone saves face. Everyone goes home. And if I don't, then Alara shoots you right now, and we take our chances with Colonel Whitfield. I reckon a judge will be more sympathetic to a mother who killed a corrupt lawman than to a dead marshal who was hunting a 9-year-old boy." Wade looked at Alara. The peacemaker was pointed at his chest. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. "You've changed," Wade said to her. "You have no idea," Alara replied. Wade closed his eyes. When he opened them, the fight was gone. Not the hate. The hate was still there, burning deep. But the fight was out of him. He'd done the math, and the math didn't work. "Fine," Wade said. "Self-defense. I'll sign the papers." "And the land?" "Jesse inherits, as Virgil's legal son." "And you never come within 50 miles of this family." "Agreed." Silas stepped back. He kept the Schofield aimed at Wade's chest. "Your horse is tied up around the bend. Take it. Ride south. Don't look back." Wade straightened his coat. He touched the back of his head where the rocket hit and winced. He looked at Alara one more time. "He'll never be safe, you know. People talk. People figure things out. That boy's got gray eyes and a family of brown. Sooner or later is our problem," Alara said. Not yours. Not anymore. Wade nodded once. He turned and walked down the canyon, one hand pressed to his bleeding arm. He didn't look back. His footsteps echoed off the walls, getting softer, then gone. Silas stood in the dust and the silence, the Schofield heavy in his hand. He was bleeding from his side, his cheek, his knee. His shoulder felt like it had been hit with a hammer. His ears were still ringing from the blast. He turned to Alara. She was leaning against the canyon wall, the peacemaker hanging at her side. The cut on her arm was bleeding through the makeshift bandage she'd tied with her teeth. Her face was white, with dust and pain. "You hit him with a rock," Silas said. "I hit him with a rock. From 30 feet up. I played a lot of horseshoes growing up." Silas stared at her. Then he laughed. A real laugh. Raw and broken and surprised. It echoed off the canyon walls and came back sounding almost like joy. Ilara smiled. Then she winced. "I think I need to sit down." Silas caught her before her knees buckled. He lowered her to the ground, his arms around her, his chin on top of her head. She pressed her face into his chest, and he could feel her shaking. Not from cold, not from fear, but from the release of everything she'd been holding for 5 days, for 10 years, for a lifetime. "It's done," Silas said. "Is it?" "Wade's a coward and a schemer, but he ain't stupid. He'll sign those papers. He'll make it legal. And if he doesn't, I'll keep my promise." "The letter to Whitfield?" "I already wrote it, 3 years ago. It's in a sealed envelope with Mrs. Hawkins. If anything happens to me, she mails it." Ilara pulled back and looked at him. "You planned for this?" "I planned for something. I didn't know what." He touched her face, tracing the line of her jaw with his rough thumb. "I didn't plan for you. I never could plan for you." "Silas." "Yeah?" "Take me to my son." Silas pulled her to her feet. He whistled for Grit. The dog appeared from behind a boulder, tail wagging, tongue out, looking enormously pleased with himself for surviving. They collected the horses. Silas helped Alara onto the paint mare, steadying her when she swayed. He mounted Dust, his bad knee locking as he swung over the saddle. "Which way?" Alara asked. "South, down the canyon to the river, then east to Copper Creek." Silas looked at her. 3 hours ride. Can you make it?" "I can make it." "Your arm needs stitching." "It can wait 3 hours." "Ilara." "Silas, I have not held my son in 5 days. Nothing on this earth is going to slow me down. Not a cut arm, not cracked ribs, not 3 hours of riding. Nothing." Silas tipped his hat. "Yes, ma'am." They rode south single file. Grit trotted ahead, nose to the ground. The canyon walls began to drop, the sky opening wider above them. By the time they hit the river, the sun was straight overhead, pouring light down on them like a benediction. Silas rode beside Alara now, close enough to catch her if she fell. She didn't fall. She sat straight in the saddle, one hand on the reins, one hand pressed to her ribs, her jaw set against the pain. "Silas," she said, not looking at him. "Yeah?" "What are you going to say to him when you meet him?" Silas was quiet for a long time. The horses walked. The river murmured. Grit splashed through a shallow crossing and shook himself dry. "I'm going to say hello," Silas said. "And then I'm going to ask him to show me what he's carving. And then I'm going to sit with him and not say anything for a while, because that's how you earn trust from a boy who's been hurt. You don't talk, you just stay." Alara turned to look at him. Her eyes were full. "How do you know that?" "Because that's what I needed when I was his age, and nobody gave it to me." They rode on, toward Copper Creek, toward Jesse, toward the beginning of something that both of them had given up on ever finding. Silas's hands were steady on the reins. His knee ached. His shoulder throbbed. His heart was beating so hard he could feel it in his teeth. He was terrified. He was 54 years old, riding toward a 9-year-old boy who had his eyes and his chin and his silence, and he was more afraid than he'd ever been in any gunfight, any war, any winter on the mountain. But he kept riding, because that's what fathers do. They ride toward the thing that scares them most, and they don't stop. Copper Creek looked smaller than Silas remembered. 10 years of mountain living had stretched his sense of scale, and now this town, this collection of timber buildings and dust roads that had once felt like the whole world, looked like something a man could hold in his palm and crush. They rode in from the north end, past the livery, past the feed store, past the church with the crooked steeple. Silas kept his eyes forward. Alara rode beside him. Grit walked between the horses, hackles up, growling low at every shadow. People stopped. They stopped on the boardwalk, in doorways, in the middle of the street. A woman holding a basket of eggs froze with her mouth open. A man at the water trough pulled his horse back and stared. 2 boys sitting on a fence rail pointed. Silas felt every eye on him. He looked like what he was, a blood-soaked mountain man riding into town with a battered woman and a one-eyed dog. Not exactly a Sunday social. "They're staring," Alara said. "Let them." "Silas, you're bleeding through your shirt." "It'll keep." "You need a doctor." "I need to see my son." Alara didn't argue. She pointed the mare toward the east side of town, past the general store that had once belonged to her father. It belonged to someone else now. The sign read, "Garfield and Sons Dry Goods." Silas didn't look at it. They turned onto a narrow lane. At the end sat a small clapboard house with a garden out front and a porch that needed paint. A rocking chair sat empty by the door. Alara pulled up and dismounted. She winced when her boots hit the ground, pressing a hand to her ribs. Silas swung down on the other side, his bad knee buckling for a half-second before he caught himself on the saddle horn. "He's inside," Alara said. Her voice had changed. Smaller. Tighter. The warrior who had thrown rocks at a U.S. Marshal and shot a man off a horse was gone. In her place was a mother who hadn't held her child in 5 days and wasn't sure he was still whole. She ran, not walked, ran up the porch steps and through the front door without knocking. Silas stood in the yard. He didn't follow. His boots felt nailed to the ground. Grit sat beside him and whined. "I know, boy," Silas whispered. "I know." From inside the house, a sound. A boy's voice. High, cracking, disbelieving. "Mama?" And then a crash, like a chair tipping over, and running footsteps, and Alara's voice breaking into a sob that Silas felt in his own chest like a cracked rib. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here." Silas took off his hat. He held it in both hands and looked down at it. The brim was torn. There was blood on the crown. His hands were shaking again. The front door opened. A woman stepped out. Old, straight-backed, with silver hair pulled tight, and a face that could have been carved from the same rock as the mountains. Widow Mabel Hawkins. She looked at Silas the way a hawk looks at a mouse. "Silas Cade," she said. Not a greeting, an identification. "Ma'am?" "You look like you got dragged behind a horse." "Feel like it too, ma'am." "She told me you'd come. 10 years ago, when she married that Dunn boy, she sat in my kitchen and cried and told me one day you'd come back." Mabel crossed her arms. I told her she was a fool. You were right. I was wrong. You're here. Mabel looked him up and down. You're also bleeding on my walkway. Get inside. I'll send for Doc Fitch. I'll wait out here, ma'am, if it's all the same. It ain't all the same. You're dripping. Inside. I don't want to. Silas stopped. He looked at the door. Is he in there? Mabel's hard face softened by 1 degree. Maybe 2. He's in there, holding on to his mama like she might disappear. He hasn't let go of her since she walked in. I'll wait. Silas Cade, I have known you since you were a 20-year-old scout buying tobacco in this town. You were stubborn then, and you're stubborn now. But that boy in there has been waiting 5 days for his mama, and 9 years for his daddy, and I will not have you standing in my yard like a lost dog when your family is inside my house. Silas looked at her. He doesn't know me. He knows you better than you think. Now get your bleeding carcass through that door before I drag you. Silas put his hat back on. He climbed the steps. Each one felt like a mountain. He reached the door and stopped. Inside, he could hear Alara talking softly, and a boy's voice muffled against her chest. I was scared, Mama. I was real scared. Mrs. Hawkins said you'd come back, but I was scared you wouldn't. I told you I'd come back. Have I ever broken a promise to you? No, ma'am. Then I wasn't going to start. Silas pushed the door open. The hinges creaked. Alara was kneeling on the floor of the parlor, holding Jessie. The boy had his face buried in her neck, his arms wrapped tight around her. He was small for 9, thin, sharp-boned, wearing clothes that were a size too big. His hair was dark brown, thick, sticking up at angles that no amount of water would fix. Alara looked up at Silas. Her eyes were red and swollen. She gave him a look that said everything and nothing. Come here. I'm scared. He needs you. Are you ready? Silas wasn't ready. He would never be ready. He stepped inside anyway. Jessie heard the footstep. He pulled back from his mother and turned his head. His eyes found Silas, and Silas stopped breathing. Gray. Gray like granite. Gray like a winter sky. Gray like his own eyes looking back at him from a face he'd never seen, but recognized all the way down to his bones. The boy stared. Silas stared back. Neither of them moved. Jessie, Alara said softly, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand. This is Silas. He's the one who helped me. He's the one I told you about. The mountain man, Jessie whispered. Yes. With the dog. His name's Grit. He's outside. Jessie looked at Silas with an expression that nearly broke him. Hope and terror and longing all tangled up in a 9-year-old face that had learned too early that men were dangerous, that big hands meant pain, that trust was a trap. Silas knelt down, slowly, the way he'd approach a wild horse or a wounded animal. He knelt until he was at Jessie's eye level, and he stayed there. He didn't reach out. He didn't move closer. He just knelt and let the boy look at him. Hey, Silas said. Hey, Jessie said. Your mama tells me you carve wood. Jessie nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of pine. It was rough, half-shaped, but Silas could see what it was becoming. A bird. That a songbird? Silas asked. Jessie's eyes widened. How'd you know? Because the tail feathers curve up like that, and you left the beak long. That's a meadowlark. Mama said you made one, a long time ago. I did. I made it for her. Jessie looked at his mother, then back at Silas. His little hand tightened around the carving. Are you going to stay? The question hit Silas like a bullet he didn't see coming. Clean, through the center. "Yeah," Silas said. His voice cracked on the word. "I'm going to stay." "For how long?" "For good." Jesse stared at him, searching, testing. The boy had been lied to before. Silas could see it. Every adult in this child's life had either hurt him or failed him, and he was standing here trying to decide if this stranger would be any different. "I ain't going to lie to you, Jesse," Silas said. "I'm not going to tell you pretty things that aren't true. I'm new at this. I don't know how to be what you need. But I'm here, and I'm not leaving." Jesse took a step forward, just one. Then he held out the wooden bird. "Can you show me how to do the feathers? I keep messing them up." Silas took the carving, his scarred, broken hand holding this tiny piece of wood that his son had shaped. He turned it over, feeling the grain, finding the flow. "You're cutting against the grain here," Silas said. "Feel that? How the wood fights you?" Jesse nodded. "Wood's like people, Jesse. You can't force it to be something it ain't. You got to find which way it wants to go, and then help it get there." He pulled the pocket knife from his belt, not the hunting knife, the small one, and made 3 careful cuts. The feather took shape under his thumb. "See? With the grain, not against it." Jesse leaned in, watching. His shoulder touched Silas's arm. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Something broke open in Silas's chest. Not painfully, more like a frozen river cracking in spring. The sound of something hard giving way to something alive. "Can I try?" Jesse asked. "It's your bird." Jesse took the wood and the knife. He made a cut, careful, slow, tongue sticking out in concentration. The curl of wood peeled away clean. "That's it," Silas said. "That's exactly it." Jesse looked up at him, and he smiled. Small, cautious, but real. Mabel Hawkins stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, watching. She didn't say a word, but when she turned to go to the kitchen, she wiped her eyes with her apron, and she did it fast enough that she thought nobody saw. Alara saw. Doc Ezra Fitch arrived 20 minutes later. He was a thin man with whiskey on his breath and steady hands, and he looked at Silas with the weary recognition of a man who'd patched up more gunshot wounds than he cared to count. "Take off the shirt," Fitch said, setting his bag on the kitchen table. Silas pulled the shirt over his head. Alara, standing in the doorway, drew a sharp breath. She hadn't seen the full damage. The graze on his side was crusted with dry blood. His shoulder was swollen and purple from slamming into horses and men. Old scars covered his torso. The bear, the arrow, a dozen smaller stories written in white tissue. "You've been busy," Fitch said, threading a needle. "You should see the other fellows." "I heard. Pruitt crawled into town an hour ago, dragging his leg behind him like a broken rudder. He's been talking." Fitch leaned in and started stitching the graze on Silas's ribs. "Says Wade came up the mountain to serve a warrant, and you ambushed him." "That's what Pruitt says." "That's what Pruitt says. Wade hasn't come back yet." Fitch tied off a stitch and cut the thread. "What really happened?" "Self-defense. Wade came with 4 men and guns to kill a woman and a child. I objected." "Objected pretty loud from what Pruitt tells it. Bear traps, blasting powder, half the canyon came down." "It was a spirited objection." Fitch almost smiled. "Hold still. This next one's going to hurt." It hurt. Silas gripped the edge of the table and breathed through his nose. Alara moved behind him and put her hand on his back. Her palm was warm against his skin. "There's going to be talk," Fitch said quietly, not looking up from his work. "Pruitt's already running his mouth. Most of the town is glad Virgil's dead. Don't look at me like that. It's true. Everybody knew what he did to her. But Wade's got friends, property men, ranchers who owe him favors. Wade and I have an understanding, Silas said. What kind of understanding? The kind where he signs papers saying Virgil's death was self-defense, Ilara walks free, and Jesse inherits the Dunn land. Fitch stopped stitching. He looked at Silas over the rim of his spectacles. And Wade agreed to this? He was persuaded. By what? By the fact that the alternative involved a letter to Colonel James Whitfield at Fort Laramie, detailing every crooked thing Wade Dunn has done in this territory for the past 15 years. Fitch let out a low whistle. You've been planning this. Not this exactly, but something. And if Wade changes his mind? He won't. But if he does? Silas met the doctor's eyes. Then I'll handle it. Fitch held his gaze for a moment, then went back to stitching. You know, Cade, when you left this town, I figured you for dead within a year. Mountain living kills most men. And you weren't exactly in a healthy frame of mind. I wasn't. But here you are, 10 years later, shot up, beat up, and bleeding on Mabel Hawkins's table. And somehow, you looked more alive than the day you left. Silas didn't answer that. He looked through the doorway to the parlor, where Jesse was sitting cross-legged on the floor, carving the wooden bird. Grit had come inside at some point. Mabel had apparently decided that one-eyed wolf dogs were acceptable in her house, and was lying beside the boy, chin on his paws. Jesse's free hand rested on the dog's back, stroking absently. Doc, Silas said. The boy. Did Virgil? Fitch's jaw tightened. He put down the needle. I treated that child 6 times in 3 years, Cade. A broken wrist, 2 cracked ribs, bruises I couldn't count, and every time Virgil stood right behind him and told me the boy fell. And every time Ilara stood in the corner with the same bruises and the same story. And you didn't do anything. What was I going to do? Report it to the marshal? The marshal was Wade Dunn. The marshal was Virgil's brother. Fitch's voice went hard and brittle. Don't you stand in judgment of me, Cade. You weren't here. I was. I patched that boy up every time because that was all I could do. And I drank myself to sleep every night because I knew it wasn't enough. I'm not judging you, Doc. The hell you aren't. I'm asking you to help him now. Not his bones, the other thing. The thing inside that makes a boy sleep with a knife. Fitch was quiet for a long time. He finished the last stitch, tied it off, and covered the wound with a clean bandage. Then he sat back and took a flask from his coat pocket. He didn't drink from it. He just held it. That boy needs time, Fitch said. He needs a safe place. He needs a man in his life who doesn't raise a hand to him. He needs to learn that loud voices don't mean pain, and that being quiet won't save him from anything. He looked at Silas. Can you be that man? I don't know. I've never been a father. Nobody knows until they do it. The ones who worry about being good at it are usually the ones who are. That sounds like something you read in a book. I read it in a bottle, but the principle holds. Fitch stood up and snapped his bag shut. Now let me look at Ilara's arm before she bleeds through another shirt. Ilara sat down and let Fitch clean and stitch the cut. It was deep, but clean. Rock chips, not a bullet. Jesse watched from the doorway, his face tight with worry. Does it hurt, Mama? No, baby. Doc Fitch has magic hands. I have whiskey hands, Fitch corrected. Which is the next best thing? Is Mama going to be okay? Jesse asked. And he wasn't asking about the arm. He was asking the bigger question, the one he'd been asking his whole life without words. Silas crossed the room. He knelt beside Jesse in the doorway. "Your mama is the toughest person I've ever met," he said. "And I've met grizzly bears." Jesse looked at him. "Real grizzly bears?" "One gave me this." Silas pointed to the scar on his jaw. "I was 26. Didn't see him coming until he was on top of me." "What happened?" "I got lucky. He got bored." "Did you kill him?" "No. He left on his own. I figured any creature that tough earned the right to walk away." Jesse thought about this. "My pa, Virgil, he killed things. Birds, dogs. He shot Mrs. Hawkins's cat once because it came in the yard." Silas felt his stomach turn. "That's not strength, Jesse. That's weakness pretending to be strength. Real strong men don't need to hurt things that are smaller than them." "Are you strong?" "Some days." "Are you mean?" "I try not to be." Virgil said mountain men are mean. He said they're savages who eat raw meat and don't bathe. Well, I bathe, when I remember. And I cook my meat mostly. But I ain't going to lie to you. I've done things I'm not proud of. I've hurt people. I've killed people. Some of them deserved it, and some of them didn't. And I carry all of it. Jesse studied him with those gray eyes, his eyes, and Silas let him. He didn't try to look softer or kinder or better than he was. He just let the boy see him, all of him. The scars and the blood and the rough edges and whatever small light still burned underneath. "You're her mountain man," Jesse said finally, not a question. "I am. She talks about you when she thinks I'm sleeping." Silas swallowed. "What does she say?" "She says you're the only good thing she ever chose, and that one day you'd find us." Jesse paused. "She says I have your eyes." Silas couldn't speak. The words jammed in his throat like a fist. He nodded. "Are you my pa?" The room went silent. Even Fitch stopped pretending to organize his bag. Ilara sat perfectly still in the chair, the bandage half wrapped around her arm, tears streaming down her face. "Yeah, Jesse," Silas said. "I'm your pa." Jesse didn't move, didn't smile, didn't cry. He just stood there, processing it the way a child processes something too big to hold, by going very still and very quiet and letting it settle. "Okay," Jesse said. "Okay?" "Okay." Jesse looked down at the wooden bird in his hand. "Will you show me more? About the carving?" "Every day, if you want." "I want." Jesse turned and walked back to his spot on the floor. He sat down next to Grit and started carving again. His hands were steady. His face was calm. And if his eyes were a little brighter than before, and if he sat a little straighter, and if his shoulders dropped just a fraction from where they'd been held tight against his ears, well, that was just a boy deciding it was safe to take up a little more space in the world. Silas stood up. His knee popped. His ribs ached. His shoulder was on fire. He walked to the parlor doorway and leaned against the frame, watching his son carve a wooden bird on a stranger's floor. And he thought, this is what I almost missed. This is what I almost threw away. This, right here. Mabel appeared with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Silas and kept one for herself. She stood beside him, watching the boy. "He hasn't carved in 5 days," Mabel said quietly. "Not since Ilara left. He just sat by the window and waited." "He won't have to wait anymore." "You sure about that? Because if you ride out again, Silas Cade, if you go back up that mountain and leave these 2 behind, I will personally track you down and shoot you myself. And unlike Alara, I won't aim for the hat. I'm not going anywhere, Mabel. You said that once before. I was a different man. You're the same man, just older and slower and slightly more shot. She sipped her coffee. But I suppose that'll have to do. From the kitchen, Fitch called out. I need to see you again, Cade. That shoulder's going to stiffen up. Come by my office Thursday. I'll be there. And the Lara needs rest. Real rest. Not whatever you two have been doing for the past week. We've been running for our lives, Doc. Then stop running. You're home now. Home. Silas turned the word over in his mind. He hadn't thought of anywhere as home since he was 12 years old and his mother died of cholera on a Missouri farm. Home was a word for other people, people with roots and families and reasons to stay. He looked at Jessie. He looked at Alara, who was watching him from the kitchen with her bandaged arm cradled against her chest and a look in her eyes that said everything. I'm tired. I'm hurt. I'm here. I'm yours. Don't let go. He looked at the coffee in his hand, given to him by an old woman who had just threatened to shoot him if he left. Maybe home wasn't a place. Maybe it was just the spot where people expected you to be tomorrow. Silas, Alara called from the kitchen. Yeah? Come sit down. You're swaying. He was. The blood loss, the riding, the fighting, the sheer emotional weight of the last 12 hours was catching up to him. His body was sending final notices. He walked to the kitchen, sat down across from Alara. Their knees touched under the table. She reached across and took his hand. Her fingers interlaced with his. Small, strong, warm. From the parlor, the soft sound of a knife on wood, curl after curl falling to the floor. Grit's tail thumping lazily. We need a plan, Alara said. I know. We can't stay at Mabel's forever. The Dunn house. I can't go back there. Not ever. You won't. The land, though, it's Jesse's. Legally. If Wade signs those papers. He'll sign. But we need somewhere to live, Silas. Somewhere real. Somewhere Jesse can have a room and a yard and a dog that's his and a life that doesn't involve hiding. Silas rubbed his thumb across her knuckles. There's 40 acres north of town, where the creek bends. I looked at it 10 years ago, before I left. Thought about buying it. Thought about building something. Why didn't you? Because building something means staying. And staying meant being close to you. And being close to you meant wanting you. And wanting you meant... Meant what? Meant admitting I was a man who needed something. And I'd spent my whole life making sure I didn't need anything. Alara squeezed his hand. And now? Silas looked through the doorway at Jesse. The boy had finished one wing of the bird. He was holding it up to the light, turning it, checking his work. He caught Silas looking and held it up higher. Good? Jesse called. Real good, son, Silas called back. He turned to Alara. Now I need everything. And it scares me half to death. But I'd rather be scared and here than safe and alone on that mountain. That might be the longest speech you've ever made. Don't get used to it. I'll treasure it forever. You're mocking me. I'm loving you, Silas Cade. There's a difference. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. The rough scratch of his beard against her skin. The gentleness of it. This man who could kill with his hands, pressing his mouth to her fingers like she was made of something precious. 40 acres, Alara said, by the creek. Big windows, porch all the way around. A room for Jesse with a real bed. And a workshop for the carving. And a garden. I want a garden, Silas. I haven't grown anything in 10 years. You grew a son. Alara's eyes filled again. I did, didn't I? A good one. A strong one, in spite of everything. Because of everything. He's strong because he had to be. I just wish he didn't have to be. He won't anymore. That's a promise I intend to keep. The afternoon light slanted through Mabel's kitchen window. Somewhere outside, a horse whinnied. Somewhere closer, a boy hummed softly while he carved. A tune Silas didn't recognize. Probably something Alara sang to him at bedtime. Silas sat at the table, holding the hand of the woman he'd loved for half his life, listening to the son he'd never known he had, bleeding through a bandage in a borrowed kitchen, in a town that used to feel like a cage. And he thought, this is enough. This, right here. Whatever comes next, Wade, the law, the land, the gossip, the hard work of building a life from scratch at 54. This moment, right now, with her hand in mine and that boy humming in the next room, this is enough. Grit padded into the kitchen, circled twice, and lay down across Silas's boots with a heavy sigh. Guess he's staying too, Alara said. Guess so. Silas? Yeah? Welcome home. He didn't answer. He just held her hand a little tighter and listened to his son hum, and let the words settle into his chest like a seed finding soil for the first time in 54 years. Home. Wade Dunn rode into Copper Creek 3 days later. Silas heard about it from Mabel, who heard about it from the postmaster, who saw the marshal ride past the general store with his arm in a sling and his jaw set like a man chewing glass. Silas was sitting on Mabel's porch, whittling a handle for a new axe, when Alara came through the door. Her face was pale. He's back, she said. I know. He's at the courthouse. Good, that's where the papers are. Silas, what if he doesn't? He will. But what if? Silas set down the knife and looked at her. He will. And if he doesn't, I walk over there and remind him why he should. But he will. Alara sat down on the step beside him. Her arm was still bandaged, the stitches tight under clean linen that Mabel changed twice a day. She was healing. They all were. Slowly, imperfectly. The way real healing works. Jesse asked about you this morning, Alara said. What did he ask? He asked if you'd be here when he got back from the creek. What'd you tell him? I told him yes. Then I'll be here. He also asked if you snore. Silas looked at her. Why? Because he's thinking about what it'll be like, living together. He's never had a man in the house who didn't. She stopped. Her jaw tightened. He's trying to figure out if you're safe. Am I? You know you are. He doesn't. Not yet. That's fair. Silas picked up the knife again. I snore like a freight train, by the way. Tell him that. Give him something real to worry about. Alara almost laughed. Almost. Then she grabbed his arm. Someone's coming. A boy was running up the lane, one of the telegraph clerk's sons, skinny, out of breath. He skidded to a stop at Mabel's gate. Mr. Cade? Marshal Dunn says he wants to see you at the courthouse. Right now. Silas stood up. He tucked the knife into his belt and reached for his hat. I'm coming with you, Alara said. No. Silas. Stay with Jesse. If something goes wrong, you take him to Mabel's root cellar, and you wait for me. Nothing's going to go wrong. Then you'll have a boring afternoon in the cellar. He put his hat on and stepped off the porch. I'll be back in an hour. You'd better be. Yes, ma'am. He walked. He didn't ride. He wanted the town to see him, upright, unhurried, unarmed except for the knife on his belt. He wanted them to see a man walking to the courthouse like a citizen, not a fugitive, not a mountain ghost. People watched. They always watched. But the stares were different now. 3 days of Pruitt's talking had spread the story through every saloon, church pew, and kitchen table in Copper Creek. The details shifted with each telling. Some versions had Silas killing 10 men. Some had Alara shooting Wade point blank. But the core was always the same. A woman defended her child. A man came off a mountain to help her. And the Dunn family's rot had finally been dragged into the light. Silas pushed through the courthouse door. It was a single room. A desk, 2 chairs, a flag, and a portrait of President Arthur hanging crooked on the wall. Wade Dunn sat behind the desk. His arm was in a proper sling now, and someone had stitched the cut on his scalp. He looked diminished, smaller than the canyon. That's what happens when you take a man's power away. He shrinks. "Close the door," Wade said. Silas closed it. He didn't sit. "I've drawn up the papers," Wade said. He pushed a stack of documents across the desk. His voice was flat, empty. Death certificate for Virgil Dunn. Cause of death, accidental discharge during a domestic altercation. Signed by me as presiding authority. Silas picked up the document. He read it carefully. Every word. "Second document," Wade continued. "Transfer of Virgil Dunn's estate, house, land, and all property, to Jesse Dunn, held in trust by his mother, Alara Dunn, until the boy reaches majority." Silas read that too. "This says Jesse Dunn, son of Virgil Dunn." "That's what it says." "And that's what it'll always say." Wade's eye twitched. "That's what it'll always say." Silas set the papers down. "Where do we sign?" "Alara signs the estate documents. I've already signed the death certificate." Wade reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a third document. "There's one more thing." Silas tensed. "A voluntary statement from William Pruitt, deputy, confirming the events as described. Self-defense. No charges to be filed." Wade slid it across. "I convinced him it was in his best interest." "I'm sure you did." "Don't push it, Cade." Silas looked at the papers. Everything was there. Everything Alara needed to be free. Everything Jesse needed to be safe. It was all right there, in ink and legalese. And all it had cost was a canyon full of blood and a lifetime of secrets. "One more thing," Silas said. "We agreed this isn't about the agreement. This is about what comes next." Silas put both hands flat on the desk and leaned in. "Jesse is 9 years old. He's a child. Whatever you think about his blood, whatever you think about his name, he is a child. And he has been beaten and terrorized for his entire life by your family." Wade's jaw muscles jumped. "You're going to leave this town," Silas said. "Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. You're going to request a transfer to another territory, Montana, Dakota, I don't care. But you are going to remove yourself from this boy's life completely and permanently." "That wasn't part of our deal." "It is now." "You're in no position to—" "I'm in every position, Wade. I've got Whitfield's letter. I've got 2 witnesses to your confession in the canyon. And now I've got your signed documents admitting the death was accidental. Which means if you ever try to reopen the case, you'll be contradicting your own paperwork." Silas straightened up. "You're finished here. You just don't know it yet." Wade stared at him. The hate was still there, deep, old, permanent. But it was buried now, under layers of calculation and self-preservation. Wade Dunn was many things, but above all, he was a survivor. And survivors know when the ground has shifted. 6 months, Wade said. "I'll request a transfer within 6 months." 3. 4. 3, Wade, or the letter goes out tomorrow. Wade closed his eyes, opened them. 3 months. Silas picked up the papers. Pleasure doing business. Cade. Silas stopped at the door. You think you've won, Wade said. You think this is some kind of happy ending. But you're 54 years old, with a blown-out knee and a woman and a boy to feed. The mountain won't take care of you anymore. You've got to live down here now, with people, with rules, with all the things you ran away from. That a threat? That's a fact. You've been a ghost for 10 years. Ghosts don't make good fathers. Silas opened the door. The afternoon light poured in. Maybe not, but they're hell on corrupt marshals. He walked out and didn't look back. He found Alara at Mabel's kitchen table, both hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't drunk. She stood up when he walked in. Her eyes searched his face. He held up the papers. It's done, he said. Self-defense. Ruling's official. Jesse inherits everything. Wade's transferring out within 3 months. Alara took the papers. She read them the way Silas had. Every word, every line. Her hands were shaking by the time she finished. It's over, she whispered. The legal part, yeah. She set the papers down and walked into his arms. She pressed her face against his chest, and he held her, one hand on the back of her head, the other around her waist. She was trembling, not from cold, not from fear. From the release of a weight she'd been carrying so long, she'd forgotten what standing straight felt like. I'm free, she said. You've always been free, Alara. You just didn't have the paperwork. She laughed into his shirt. It was a wet, broken, beautiful sound. Mama? Jesse was standing in the parlor doorway. Grit was behind him, tail wagging. The boy looked at his mother, crying into the chest of a man twice her size, and his face tightened with fear. Old fear. Automatic fear. The fear of a child who has learned that when adults hold each other, somebody's about to get hurt. Silas saw it. He saw the boy's shoulders hunch up, the way his hand went to the pocket where he kept his carving knife, the way his weight shifted to the balls of his feet, ready to run. Hey, Jesse, Silas said gently. He loosened his hold on Alara, but didn't let go completely. Your mama's okay. These are happy tears. Jesse frowned. Happy tears? People cry when they're happy sometimes. I know it doesn't make much sense. Virgil never cried. Virgil wasn't happy. Jesse considered this. He looked at his mother. Mama, you happy? Alara wiped her face and turned to her son. She knelt down and opened her arms. Jesse hesitated. Just a breath, just a flicker. And then he walked into them. I'm so happy, baby, Alara said. We're safe. Nobody's going to hurt us anymore. Because of him? Jesse looked at Silas over his mother's shoulder. Because of all of us, Alara said. Because we're a family now. A real family? A real family. Jesse pulled back. He looked at Silas with those gray granite eyes. Virgil used to say he was my family. Then he'd hit me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Silas felt them land in his gut, one by one, like stones dropping into a well. He walked over and knelt down, eye level, the way he'd done it the first time. Jesse, I'm going to make you a promise, and I want you to listen close, because I don't make many promises, and I don't break the ones I make. Okay. I will never hit you. I will never raise my hand to you. I will never raise my hand to your mother, not in anger, not in drink, not for any reason on God's earth. That's not who I am. How do I know? You don't. Not yet. You'll know because of time. Because tomorrow I'll be here, and the day after that. and I won't hit you on any of those days. And after enough days stack up, you'll stop counting. That's how trust works, Jesse. It's not a word. It's a pile of days. Jesse stared at him. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the wooden bird. Finished now, both wings carved, the beak smooth, the tail feathers curving up exactly right. "I finished it," Jesse said. Silas took it. He turned it in his hands. The craftsmanship was rough, a child's work. But the eye was there, the instinct. The bird looked alive. "This is good," Silas said. And he meant it. "This is real good, Jesse. Can we make another one? Together?" "What do you want to make?" "A wolf, like Grit." "Then we'll make a wolf." Silas handed the bird back. "But first, I gotta build us a house. You want to help with that too?" Jesse's eyes went wide. "A real house?" "A real house. By the creek. With a porch all the way around and a room that's just yours." "Just mine?" "Just yours. With a door that locks from the inside." Jesse blinked. His lip trembled. For a second, Silas thought the boy was going to cry. But Jesse Dunn was his father's son, and instead of crying, he straightened his spine, stuck out his chin, and said, "I can carry boards. I'm strong." "I know you are." "And I can hammer. I watched the blacksmith." "Then you'll hammer." "And Grit can guard the house." "That's exactly what Grit will do." Jesse nodded once. Firm, decided. Then he turned and walked back to the parlor to carve, because he was 9 years old, and the world had just gotten bigger, and he needed to sit with that for a while. Silas bought the 40 acres the next week. Cash money from the sale of 10 years' worth of beaver pelts and elk hides he'd stored in the old mine shaft. The land office clerk looked at the stack of bills, looked at Silas, and asked no questions. They started building in August. Silas drew the plans on butcher paper. A simple house, 4 rooms, a stone fireplace, a porch that faced west toward the mountains. He hired 2 men from town to help with the heavy framing. Ilara managed the supplies, the budget, the schedule. She had a mind for numbers that Silas lacked, and a will of iron that nobody lacked, because nobody was stupid enough to argue with her. Jesse helped every day. He carried boards, just like he'd promised. He hammered nails, bent half of them, drove the other half true. He fetched water, held levels, and handed Silas tools before Silas asked for them, because the boy watched and learned the way wolves learn, by observation, not instruction. The town watched too. At first, from a distance. Copper Creek wasn't sure what to make of Silas Cade, the mountain ghost who had blown up a canyon, faced down the marshal, and moved in with Virgil Dunn's widow. The gossip was ferocious. People talked in the general store, at the church social, over fence lines. The first person to cross the gap was old Tom Garfield, who owned the dry goods store. He showed up at the building site one morning with a wagon load of lumber and no explanation. "What's this?" Silas asked. "Pine boards. Good ones. Milled last spring." "I didn't order these." "No, you didn't. Consider it a welcome gift." Tom spat tobacco juice and squinted at the framing. "You're going to want to double up those floor joists, Cade. Ground soft by the creek. It'll sag in spring." "I know about floor joists." "I'm sure you do. I'm also sure you've been living in a one-room cabin for 10 years and might have forgotten a thing or two about civilized construction." Silas looked at him. Tom looked back, chewing steadily. "Thank you," Silas said. "Don't mention it. Literally. My wife thinks I sold that lumber to the railroad." Others followed. Doc Fitch donated a wood stove, slightly used, mostly functional. The blacksmith forged hinges and door hardware and refused payment. The minister's wife brought curtains. The school teacher came by to tell Alara that Jesse could start in September and that she'd keep a special eye on him. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even acceptance exactly. It was something quieter and more Western. A community deciding, without discussion, that whatever had happened between the Cades and the Dunns was settled, and that the woman and the boy deserved a chance, and that the big scarred man with the limp had earned a place by fighting for them. Mabel Hawkins summed it up best, standing on her porch watching Silas and Jesse walk past on their way to the building site. "He's not what this town wanted," she said to Doc Fitch, who was sitting in a rocking chair, sipping whiskey at 9 in the morning. "But he might be what it needed." "That's awfully philosophical for you, Mabel."
Shut up and drink your breakfast.
The house was finished in October. The last shingle went on during the first frost, and Silas stood in the yard and looked at what he'd built. 4 walls, a roof, a chimney that drew straight, a porch with a rocking chair that he'd made himself. Better than the one on the mountain. Smoother. Built for sitting with someone instead of sitting alone. Alara came out the front door. She was wearing a blue dress and the yellow ribbon in her hair. The same shade of yellow she'd worn at the Harvest Festival 17 years ago, when Silas had wanted to tell her he loved her, and instead carved her a songbird because he couldn't find the words. "Well," she said. "Well, what? What do you think?" Silas looked at the house. He looked at her. He looked at Jesse, who was throwing sticks for grit in the yard, laughing. Really laughing. The full-body kind that Alara had described. Head tipped back, eyes crinkled. The sound of a boy who was starting to believe that not every day had a fist at the end of it. "I think I should have come down off that mountain 10 years ago," Silas said. "Yes, you should have." "I think I wasted a lot of time being alone." "Yes, you did." "And I think—" He stopped, reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. He unwrapped it. A ring, hand-forged, hammered from a silver dollar on the blacksmith's anvil. Simple, heavy, real. Alara stared at it. "I know I said I was too old for marriage," Silas said. His voice was rough, and his hands were shaking again, and he didn't care. "I know I said I was too broken, too set in my ways, too mean and stubborn and rough for any woman with sense." "You said all of that." "I was wrong." He held out the ring. "I was wrong about all of it. I wasn't too old. I was just scared. And I'd rather be scared with you than brave alone." "Silas Cade, are you proposing to me in the front yard with dirt on your face?" "I reckon I am." "You don't even have a clean shirt on." "I don't own a clean shirt." "Your knee is bleeding." "It's always bleeding." "And you're doing this in front of our son." Silas looked at Jesse. The boy had stopped throwing sticks. He was standing in the yard, watching, grit panting beside him. Jesse's face was unreadable, that careful blankness he wore when he wasn't sure yet whether to hope. "Jesse," Silas called, "I'm asking your mama to marry me. That all right with you?" Jesse thought about it. Seriously. The way 9-year-olds think about serious things, with total commitment and zero pretense. "Will you still teach me carving?" "Every day." "And build me a shelf for the animals I make?" "As many shelves as you want." "And you won't yell, even when you're mad?" "I'll try my hardest not to yell. And when I mess up, because I will, you tell me. Deal?" Jesse looked at his mother. She looked back at him with a question in her eyes. "Okay," Jesse said. "She can marry you." "Well, thank goodness I got permission," Silas muttered. Alara took the ring. She slid it onto her finger. It was a little big. They'd have to fix that. But the weight of it felt right. Heavy and simple and honest, like the man who'd made it. "I'm not going to cry," Ilara said. "You're already crying. These are happy tears." "I know. I'm learning about those." She grabbed his face, both hands, the way she'd done in Mabel's kitchen, and kissed him. Right there in the yard, in front of their son and the dog and the whole town of Copper Creek, if anyone was looking. Which they probably were, because that's what small towns do. Silas kissed her back. He tasted salt from her tears, and dust from the road, and something sweet underneath that he couldn't name, but recognized from 17 years ago, from a hayloft and a promise, and a night he'd tried to forget, and never could. "Pa!" Jessie yelled from the yard. "Grit's eating the curtains!" Silas pulled back. "I got to. Go." He jogged, limped quickly, across the yard and rescued the curtains from Grit's jaws. Jessie was laughing. Grit was wagging his tail, completely unrepentant. Silas held up the slobbered fabric and looked at his son. "We don't tell your mama about this," Silas said. "Tell me about what?" Ilara called from the porch. "Nothing!" they both yelled at the same time. Jessie looked up at Silas. Silas looked down at Jessie. And something passed between them. Not a word, not a gesture, just a recognition. A frequency. Father and son tuned to the same channel for the first time. Jessie grinned. Silas grinned back. They were married on the first Sunday of November, in the small church with the crooked steeple. Doc Fitch was best man, on account of being the only man in town Silas trusted enough to stand next to. Mabel Hawkins sat in the front pew and cried through the entire ceremony, and denied it afterward. Jessie stood beside his mother, holding the rings, wearing a new shirt that Ilara had sewn from fabric she'd bought with her own money from her own land. When the minister said, "You may kiss the bride," Jessie covered his eyes with both hands and said, "Tell me when it's over." The church laughed. Silas kissed Ilara. Grit howled from outside where he'd been tied to the fence post. And Copper Creek, Wyoming territory decided without a vote that maybe, just maybe, the mountain man and the storekeeper's daughter were going to be all right. That night, after the supper was eaten and the well-wishers had gone, and Jessie was asleep in his own room with the door locked from the inside, and Grit curled at the foot of his bed, Silas sat on the porch of the house he'd built. Ilara came out. She handed him coffee, hot, strong, sweet, the way he liked it, and sat in the chair beside him. Not on his lap, beside him. 2 chairs, 2 people, equal. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm always quiet." "This is a different quiet. This is a thinking quiet." Silas sipped the coffee. He looked out at the night. He could see the mountains from here, the bighorns, black against the stars. His mountain was up there somewhere, with the burned remains of his cabin and the ghost of the man he used to be. "I was thinking about what Wade said," Silas admitted. "About ghosts not making good fathers." "Wade Dunn doesn't get to define you, Silas." "He's not wrong, though. I've been a ghost. I've been half alive for 10 years. I don't know how to be a husband. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to live in a town with people and rules and Sunday suppers. Do you know how to love a boy who's afraid of you? I'm working on it. Do you know how to hold a woman without hurting her? I'd die before I hurt you. Do you know how to stay? I'm here, aren't I? Then you know enough. The rest is just practice." Ilara reached over and took his hand. "Nobody's born knowing how to be a family, Silas. You learn it the same way you learn to carve. You find the grain. You move with it. And when you mess up, you don't throw the wood away. You keep going. Silas turned her words over the way he turned wood, slowly, carefully, looking for the truth in the grain. She was right. She was always right. But the fear was still there, crouching in his chest like a cat in tall grass. What if I fail him? You'll fail him sometimes. Every parent does. The difference between a good father and a bad one isn't perfection. It's what you do after you fail. Virgil failed Jesse and then blamed Jesse for the failure. You'll fail Jesse and then try harder. That's the whole difference, Silas. That's everything. That simple? That hard. But yes, that's simple. Silas finished his coffee. He set the cup down on the porch railing. He looked at the stars over the bighorns. He listened to the creek running behind the house. The same creek where Jesse would fish tomorrow, where Grit would splash and bark, where Alara would sit on the bank with a book and a blanket, and the kind of peace she'd earned with blood and grit and 10 years of waiting. Alara? I said something once, up on the mountain, the night you came. I said I was too old for new beginnings. I remember. I was wrong. I wasn't too old. He squeezed her hand. I was just incomplete. Alara leaned over and kissed his cheek. The scratch of his beard, the warmth of his skin, the steadiness of a man who had finally stopped running. And now? She asked. Silas listened. To the creek, to the wind in the pines, to the faint sound of a boy breathing in sleep behind a locked door, safe for the first time in his life, to the thump of Grit's tail on a wooden floor, to the beating of his own heart, steady, strong, no longer the slow drum of a man waiting to die, but the full, fierce rhythm of a man who had finally found his reason to live. Now I'm just right, Silas said. He closed his eyes. The wind coming down off the mountains didn't sound like a scream anymore. It sounded like a song. And for the first time in 54 years, Silas Cade sat still and listened to it. And he wasn't alone. And he wasn't afraid. And he was home. What a journey. From the burning heat of the Bighorn trails to the warmth of a family reunited, Silas and Alara's story proves that some bonds are stronger than time, stronger than distance, and stronger than any bullet or badge. Silas thought his life was over, that he was a relic of a violent past buried on a mountain. But he learned that it's never too late to fight for what matters, and you are never too old to find your home. If this story moved you, if you felt the dust of the trail and the warmth of the redemption, please hit that like button. It truly helps the channel. Subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss our next adventure. And tell me in the comments, if you were Alara, would you have waited 10 years or would you have given up? I want to hear your heart. Drop your city in the comments too. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Thank you for staying with me to the very end. I'll see you in the next one.